Hello, I'm Las Vegas Cris, and I'm with my two friends here, Ron and Ted. And this is our first effort at what we're going to be doing on a regular basis, which is looking at the NFL. So uh, I will pass off the hosting duties to a seasoned veteran, Ted Sobel, who you have certainly heard on the airwaves, on the radio, on various NFL games throughout his 18-year career. Take it away, Ted.
Okay, 18 years with Sports USA, 23 years with KFWB in LA, and 3.5 decades with KNX Radio in Los Angeles. So a little bit of something about all of, for whatever sports I had to cover from a local standpoint or national. But it's great to be with you guys. The inside blitz is what we call this thing, and we're really hitting them. We're coming from, I think it's more of a safety blitz today with all three of us here. Bottom line is, guys, we're going to cover a lot in the National Football League. This time, we're going to recap the end of the 2021 NFL season through the Super Bowl and talk about what the new coaches from last year did and the new coaches that have just been hired, all 9 of them, what we expect them to do in the upcoming season. I can tell you also, I got a brand new book, Cris. I know you want to show that badly. It's called Touching Greatness. There it is. And you can see there's all the sports. There's music in it. It's a memoir growing up in L.A. And there's a guy named Aaron Rodgers who's also on the cover. Still waiting to hear from him, by the way, get some feedback. And he refuses to get back to me, so I have no idea. But I feel like just like the Packers do. So it's no big. There he is. He looks really familiar. Anyway, Rod, you tell them all about you because you are the odds wizard.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ted. Well, by the way, I am in that book as well.
Yes, you are.
And I've shared many of those same experiences with you over the years that we've known each other. And for me, it's about writing. It's about handicapping. 43 years of covering the NFL draft. Most of you have not seen my writing, but I have occasionally sent it out there over the years, even to one organization about 25 years ago. That organization isn't even in the same state that they used to be in. So that's a whole different story. Written about the draft, written about the college previews, the NFL previews, season win totals, NFL props, you name it. I've been doing it, getting a little bit more in front of the mic now instead of just in front of the typewriter. But very happy to share the stage with you, Ted and Cris, because the perspectives that we bring, it helps me and it should help everybody else in terms of how we come across what we do and why we think a certain way when we're analyzing different NFL teams, coaches, etc.
Yeah, Cris, don't you agree, though, that the three of us, not just being the Three Stooges, but we bring a different perspective from whatever we've done in the past. And I think it gives a different idea of why we like a team, why we like odds, why something is good or bad, and we're all going to have a different view of it.
Well, I think it's important to get across what we're going to deliver. And, for years, hey, it's off season. Give me 6 months off. But I think the three of us believe that the NFL doesn't stop. Unfortunately, it's, we've got the free agency starting soon. We've got the draft coming soon. We've got all kinds of stuff happening. And number one most important thing is to come up with content that's not going to bore the crap out of people. So I'm hoping that this 5-minute introduction is the most boring we're going to be, quite frankly, because what we want to do is occasionally come out with content that is not too long, that's not long-winded, that's not boring. Just get to the point and end it. And we can come up with as many of these as possible and hopefully keep it on the shorter side of things and just kind of hit the bullet points. And a lot of the stuff throughout the time is going to be interesting to people. So with that in mind, I'll pop it back over to you guys. And I'm just a little background. I'm learning how to work this StreamYard crap. So I'm a little distracted. I've got all this stuff in front of me, and it's the last time I'm going to reference it. But go ahead, and I'll try to change the topics with you guys as you're talking.
Well, we love whatever buttons you're pushing. We appreciate them because we don't have them. So that's bottom line. Ron, tell them let's go with the subject of the 2021 season and basically into the Super Bowl. And unbelievable, the Cincinnati Bengals were there, but they didn't win, obviously.
They didn't win. It seems like a long time since the Super Bowl, but it's really hasn't been a long time. It's been just barely over 2 weeks, but it seems like we're already into the offseason and we're talking about other things. But a little bit more recap, just my closing 3 thoughts on the Super Bowl. Number 1, if Odell Beckham is healthy the entire 60 minutes, I think the Rams actually cruise in this game, because then he's a force. We saw it in the first quarter. Jefferson goes back to being the third role Van Jefferson, and he can go deep and he can exploit the third safety or cornerback in the coverage, but that didn't happen. My second takeaway is that Cincinnati had 4, even 5 chances to enhance their 20-16 lead or whatever the score was at the time, and they failed 4 consecutive drives. So it wasn't just that we saw the Rams struggling to get ahead. It's that Cincinnati kind of stopped in the fourth quarter. The Rams figured out the pass rush and so on. And my final take from the Super Bowl, as we leave it behind, is I was disappointed that the referees called one kind of game for 58 minutes and another kind of game for the last 2 minutes. It just wasn't in character. If they were going to say it and do it and call it the way they did for 58 minutes, that should have carried over. If they wanted to call it tighter, that should have happened earlier. That's my take.
I agree with most. Go ahead, Chris.
In the previous year, Tampa Bay went through and won the Super Bowl, but they did it, having that, plus 10 or 12 turnover ratio. And that was, just bizarre. And they got away with it. And that's what really helped them out. And we went into the last season thinking that they were better than they were, quite frankly. Because that whole regular season, Tampa was sort of like, And I see a similar situation here with Cincinnati. I think they're a great team. They've got a great future, but they're going to be going into this last place or first place schedule next year. I think people drank too much Joe Burrow Kool-Aid, so to speak. I really like that guy. I think he's got a great future, but he didn't really do all that much in the playoff games. He wasn't instrumental in those victories. He didn't work any miracles. And I think people expected way too much out of him. So that's my thought on it, that the Bengals have a bright future, but it's going to be a little bit down to earth next season.
And I mostly agree with what you said, but I totally disagree with the Burrow angle, because Burrow couldn't do much because he had the worst offensive line in the history of the Super Bowl. Now, not just the Super Bowl, but the entire playoffs, obviously. And to be able to win the games they did without Joe Burrow, if they just had Joe Smith, they had zero chance. And he had to rush the pass. He had to get rid of it like immediately. And in the Super Bowl, he did that twice as quickly as he did the other playoff games. It's like, what do we need to do to make sure I'm not sacked 20 times instead of maybe the previous 9? So that was a major issue to me. And I thought what he did was the best he could do. And that goes to show you, if they don't draft at least 2 offensive linemen of quality coming up, they're not going anywhere for the long haul.
Yeah, I think I think that I'll be curious as if to see if the coaching improves a little bit. We were kind of down on Zach Taylor. What did he have? 6 wins, 26 losses going into the season. So Burrow may be the real deal, but he's got to be coached up still. I mean, young quarterbacks always could use better coaching. So that's a curiosity for me moving forward.
Well, he's also been in, Chris, he's been in the league as long as Jordan Love has. So when you think about that, one guy has a little experience, the other one doesn't. That comes into play.
I think it'll also be interesting to see, because I think a lot of people, including myself, thought they made a big blunder not taking offensive line help last year, and they let the Lions have Sewell. And boy, things might have been a lot different with Sewell. But I think that they actually did make the right move, and I think we're going to see a trend with marrying quarterbacks with their receivers wherever they can going down the road. And Sewell may be just as great as a pick as they had taken, but we won't know down the road. But they did what was best for them.
Yeah. Well, bottom line is, I think the next draft is huge for the Bengals. I mean, that to me is going to set them up for the next few years. Otherwise, they're just the same team that's just going to be, all right, well, you got some great playmakers, but you got nobody in the trenches to stop anybody.
We'll talk about Cincinnati when we go in divisional previews.
Yeah.
But, with a little tease, this is an unusual draft year for them. They're not drafting 8th or 10th or 11th anymore. They're drafting 31st and 63rd and 95th. I mean, it's a whole different story when you see all these guys go off the board ahead of them.
All right, so let's now talk about the coaches, all right, guys, from last year, the new ones.
Campbell, my Lions, they got a good coach. They loved them.
You know what? Dan Campbell, to me, no team has played harder for their new coach than the Lions have. And when you think about how bad they were, and they still kept playing hard, that was impressive.
They played one of the most difficult schedules in the league,
yeah.
And they were decimated with injuries, and they had no optimism amongst themselves walking into the season. And when they were winless late in the season, they were polling approval of Campbell, and he was getting 99% approval. The players love his intensity. The fans love his intensity. We know he's going to make some blunders, but he's going to be really interesting. I kind of we're going to touch on it when we do season wins and stuff like that. I think everybody's kind of high on the Lions, and maybe they're going to be a little bit too high on the Lions.
Yeah, got to be careful with that, obviously. It's been a long
The Lions didn't start at square one. They started at square -1 because Matt Patricia built a team to run the ball and to stop the run. This is the NFL. This is 2021. Now we're in 2022. He had to undo the draft picks that Patricia had and the free agents that he had. And he started with a roster with zero wide receiver help. There were a lot of things he had to undo, and you could see it coming together at the end of the year. And so, what I said is he had to change the culture and now lay the foundation. And he's got 3 of the top 34 picks in the draft coming up. One at the top of the second, and of course the Rams pick, which is now 32nd. They have a chance to make a big leap right away. So if we're recapping Detroit and what they did, they're fine. I like where they are. I think they got the right coach. Time will tell, but I don't have anything bad to say about their record or their season of last year.
And we're not going to talk about Urban Meyer. Everybody knows that story. But who else is there to discuss from last year that was new?
Well, I would like to talk about the Jets. Because
okay.
this was my biggest season win total under. And the reason why that was the case is because, as I've been harping along for anybody who's known me for 10 plus years or whatever, if you have a rookie quarterback, you better surround him with a tall target at tight end because there are tighter windows in the NFL and the quarterback's not ready. And you better protect him as best as you can. And the Jets basically had one offensive lineman worth their salt going into last year's draft, and they ended up with 1.5 after last year's draft. It was a no-win situation for a quarterback who played at BYU, played a very soft schedule due to COVID the previous year, had to go against experienced head coaches in New England twice, Buffalo twice, and a Miami team that got the most out of what talent that they had. That was going to be 1-5 maximum out of their own division. And it played that way. There were no surprises to me. They have a big chore ahead of them in order to not waste draft choices moving forward. I will say that with their coaching hire, Robert Saleh, if that's how you say his name, I have no negative or positive on what he did. He was just dealt a bad hand, and the hand played exactly the way that I thought it would.
Vince Lombardi would not have made this team any better. You can't do it without players. Robert Saleh is sort of stuck, just like the last few coaches have been stuck. And they had some good coaches and they had some not so good coaches. They got to change what's going on in the front office. It's a bad organization right now. And if they don't change the culture, it's not going to matter who the coach is.
How about them Chargers, Ron? You've been complaining for years about those special teams. And I remember reading your write-up last year. You had special teams had literally cost them, I think it was like 8 games over the previous 3 years, correct?
Yeah, it was 11/4. That cost them maybe 1 or 2, maybe 2 this year. In 7 of the last 8 years, they should have made the playoffs based on their offensive performance and their defensive metric performance. And they didn't make it. It's just incredible. What did I say? 32nd, 29th, 31st, 22nd, 32nd, 32nd in the last 6 years.
At least they didn't go backwards.
Yeah, it's an unbelievably inept organization when it comes to that. When you think of other organizations and how much pride and how much attention they give to it, they will have a new special team coordinator this year. 15 years with Minnesota, about a dozen of which have been involved with special teams. So let's see what happens there. They've wasted the last 7 years, essentially.
And on top of all that, Ron, if they bring in a guy who's breathing, he'll be better than what they've had. Okay. So forget that. Let's just say they can only go up. But their new head coach, and it says at the bottom of your screen, bullheaded. That's a good way of calling this guy. Brandon Staley has done some really good things as a rookie coach. You never know what you're going to get out of a first-year guy. We've always say play the unders almost no matter what with a first-year coach. There's so many new ones now. I don't even. You still need about 65% to feel good about that. But you know what? This guy refuses to change his ways, and if he's going to keep doing that, he's going to be working at 7-Eleven soon. So I don't see him as a head coach if he's going to. The players are going to turn on him because he cost them the playoffs this year. End of story.
I think they'll be okay. I'm very optimistic about the Chargers. I think we all are. They just need to kind of settle in a little bit. One team that I was disappointed with was Atlanta last year. I really felt that they would solve their red zone issues on offense, and they did nothing with it. Ryan was a complete disappointment. What is going on with Ridley? That guy just disappeared off the face of the planet. He's like, they don't even talk about him. There's something seriously wrong there.
But also, Cris, you bring in an offensive coordinator. This is a guy who should have helped turn it around, and he looked more like he was a DC instead of an OC because he did nothing to improve the offense. This is a second year that he needs to show he's going to make a difference. Otherwise, he's just a name, and they're going to have to make a change again soon.
I'll piggyback on that comment. 2 years in a row, Matt Ryan has regressed in fourth quarter change of lead situations. Very disappointing for somebody who's pretty level-headed, understands the game, high percentage, hasn't come through in the fourth quarter. But the number I'll give you is, I think it was 18. 18 defensive sacks in 17 games. They were already bottom 1, 2, and 3 the previous 3 years. Now they've set, you can't do that, and it's their fault because they haven't even paid attention to the draft in that area. Until they change their draft culture, and I don't know what they're coaching. I'm Luke cold. I guess I'm more thumbs down than thumbs up on the coaching situation, but the GMs over the years have not helped this team at all.
They've also had a downward spiral in their playmakers, I think, too. They've lost some guys. They're just getting old, and they need to start over again, and they better do it now. Otherwise, they're going to be a last-place team.
I think the one feel-good story of the year is probably the Eagles, and Ron's probably going to be best at he always points out that it's really important for these teams to get those early buys, and that's exactly what the Eagles needed and found successful for their season.
Yeah, we talked about this. They had rushed 22 times per game in their first 6 games until they had that mini bye week to assess what they were doing. They had a running quarterback who's not ready to throw from the pocket in Jalen Hurts. His best trait would be getting out to the edge, doing some misdirection with the runs, using Sanders and the other running backs, and they weren't doing that. And then after the mini bye, they ran an average of 38 to 39 times per game, put a lot of pressure on opposing defenses. Time of possession changed drastically, and they fertilized the yard. They did whatever the coach wanted them to do, and they ended up in the playoffs, a little bit over their heads in the playoffs, but making it, especially after that start. And now having 3 draft choices in the first 19 picks in this upcoming draft. One hopes that the needle is pointing up for any Philadelphia fans.
Yes, Sirianni is a player's coach. I think that bodes well for the future, but at the same time, he still needs more playmakers on offense. They don't have enough. And if they're going to rely on Jalen Hurts to run around like a maniac, that's not going to work for the long haul. It'll work for this game and that game, but they need to ease the burden of his legs a little bit and start being able to pass the ball for the long haul and for a playoff stance too.
I think it's evident we had the 17 game schedule for the first time, and we saw some effects from that. And
Yep.
One of the things, Ron, you did some research on this. The 2021 injuries were up disproportionately with this added game.
I looked at it from the standpoint of when you can bet player proposition plays, and there were 300 and some available. I made about 109 of them and stuff like that over the years. And Ted and I have tracked this for a dozen years now. 1 out of every 6 player propositions that go under do so because of injury. That's 16%. This year, the number was 20% this past year, which means that the 17 game schedule had its wear and tear by, it went from 16 to 20%. That's a rise that is significant. And there's going to be a little bit of load management, a little bit more rotation in the offensive backfields, rotation on the defensive line. It's going to skew a lot of things, but it's also going to provide a chance for some bad teams to catch some good spots against teams that are not at 100%. And of course, we still had the COVID situation where key players were out of some games during crunch time.
Do you guys agree, though, this is an adjustment period for the coaches where they're going to figure out the load management and how much they're going to need to do this? Because in a few more years, the next time we have a player's situation, we're going to have 18 games. You know what's coming. It's coming and means more injuries. So bet the unders, everybody. What can I tell? Always bet the unders, but really now more than ever.
Well, look at what Harbaugh had to deal with Baltimore. I believe their injuries, like if you had it on, like here's the whole league, Baltimore's injuries were like way up here. Like they were on their own island with games lost to injury.
Yeah, especially running backs too. They were playing with guys that were retired and the whole time. You can't do that and expect to win. And yet, look how far they got. I thought that was reasonably impressive.
Yeah, it was luckily the roster had been stacked in Baltimore, so they were still playoff worthy. They didn't get there. They didn't change their stripes in certain games. They had 4 out of 5 games down the stretch that were decided by the very last play. 2 of them, if not 3 of them, were 2-point conversion attempts. 2 of them were with the backup quarterback. So they took some chances. They did some things thinking that Lamar Jackson was back there, but he wasn't back there. But that just goes to show how that season for Baltimore rested on 2 or 3 plays, and every one of the last 7 playoff games practically decided in the last play of the game.
All right, so let's go to the new coaches. All right, guys.
Sounds good.
We got 9 of them. This could take several hours. But which one you want to start with? Jacksonville? Does that work for you? Because I'm thinking everybody just wanted to say, okay, Urban, get out of here. We want to start from scratch. We want a real pro head coach. They got no excuses now. They got a good one. Doug Peterson has won a Super Bowl, and you know what? He's a former quarterback. That's pretty good for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. You want to go, Chris?
No, I want you to go.
Okay. Addition by subtraction. When you subtract the culture of Urban Meyer from the locker room, you're automatically better. And Urban Meyer put a college-type draft into an NFL team last year, which meant they were drafting players that would succeed in college, but wouldn't move the needle in the NFL. Running backs, different niche positions, 5 different tight ends without getting a quality tight end. I just think if they do some normal things, drafting at the top of the board in almost every single round, you're going to see a quick fix from Jacksonville, who, if I'm right, Jacksonville has the 4th place schedule and Houston has the 3rd place schedule. I believe that's the case. Jacksonville won fewer games. So that's a perk also in the fact that they get to play Houston twice and they get to play some other 4th place teams. So I think they just move up automatically.
Yeah. How about Las Vegas there? In in flux because we don't really know, what the new guy's going to do. Josh McDaniels, if he hasn't evolved as a person, they're in trouble. But I'm assuming he has. And Al Davis's kid has been known to just say, "Here's the reins, run with it," which is great if you got the right guy. The question is this the right guy? Is he at the right place at the right time? I don't know. What are the feelings in Vegas, Cris? You're right there.
You know what? I think everybody was pleased with their season. They exceeded expectations for sure. Yeah. They had a lot of hardship. They had a lot of bad stuff happen to them, and they made it through. And it's all going to rest on how well Carr's going to be able to do with them. It doesn't look like they're going to. It looks like they're going to end up paying him. Hopefully, they spend their money better than paying running backs $12 million a year, $11 million a year. And get him some support because, he had a bad offensive line that got him in trouble, and then he ran out of people to throw to. So I just think that they're going to be average next year at best, personally. I think it's going to take some growing pains to get that team where it needs to be.
And is Josh McDaniels truly a head coach? I mean, he's got to prove it. He hasn't proven it yet.
Well, he's 13 years removed from his last coaching job.
I know.
So he's really earned this. He's probably matured as a person. He got a lot of good training there. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And I'll keep this really strictly to coaching because in the preview, I'm going to agree with Cris when we talk about Vegas down the line. But the up and down nature of John Gruden, the stability of the interim coach really put the team in a much better place. The craziness that went on, whatever the dynamic was between Mike Mayock and John Gruden on draft day, set the team back tremendously with some reaches that were, I couldn't believe it from a guy who covered the draft for the NFL Network to go all over the place with his own picks. I think the stability is the best thing they have going forward. The question is, there are other factors in place that may cause them to fall, but I like the fact that there's some continuity in building.
How about the New York Football Giants bringing Brian Daboll, who did a great job with Buffalo? He had the right quarterback. Now he's in a whole different situation. Now, before he had Josh Allen, what did he have and what did he do as an OC? Not great. So the question is he really a head coach? I got my doubts, and I hope he proves me wrong, but the Giants need so much. And now they got a guy, they don't even know if he's really a head coach. They're starting way down at the bottom.
Yeah, but anybody new drafting is going to be an improvement over what they've been doing.
That's true.
And it was a horrible mistake to pick up Galladay. They didn't need Galladay for $18 million. As a Lions fan, I was happy to see him go because he's never going to not be injured. So
yeah. I think the Giants have the needle pointing up the highest of any of the 9 coaches. Even if the ball turns out average, Matt Patricia sent the organization back 90 years with his last 2 games. 11 passes versus Chicago, down 14-3 in the first quarter. 2 quarterback sneaks, one on 3rd and 8 in the middle of the last game. I mean, he basically gave up on the team. It was just an awful culture, an awful environment. I like everything that's been said from the GM standpoint, from the coaching standpoint. I'm really curious to see, though, how they treat the draft when they haven't treated the draft well in the past. They've got 2 of the first 7 picks or so in the draft. This is a needle up situation.
That's good. But one more real quick thought. Nobody's responded to me saying Daboll has to produce and he has to prove he's a head coach. There's a lot of question marks there with a lot of these guys.
But with the New York Giants, they've had defensive-minded coaches for so long. It's nice to actually see them address the offensive side of the ball. That's true. This is a real plus. And we may end up throwing out 2022 because their quarterback, Daniel Jones, may just not be NFL worthy. And it's a quarterback-driven league. But if he could lay the foundation through his teaching and coaching and through drafting, the needle is really pointing up.
All right, let's go to Houston. What the heck did they? Why the hell did they make? Why did they make a change?
We don't need to talk about Houston.
Are they still in the league? I mean, come on, Lovie Smith. What is that?
Skip to Minnesota. What's going on over in Minnesota, Ron?
Lovie Smith not only gets one job, he gets two: head coach and defensive coordinator. Is that bad enough? Let's go to Minnesota.
Okay, wait. First, we got to set an early 2.5 over under on Houston. Next.
Minnesota. I mean, they had a lot of coaching there with Zimmer. Say what you want, the disconnect between Zimmer and Spielman at the end was so incredibly real, and apparently with Kirk Cousins too. And Zimmer did a lot of good things, but he also did a lot of bad things, trying to run when he had a chance to have a pass-oriented offense. Minnesota could have been better by trading up in the draft instead of drafting 39 people over the last 3 years and 101 over a 10-year stretch. It's crazy. They have so many different roster decisions they have to make. They're going to be up over the cap. I can't tell you much about the coach, but I think we're going to be in a one-step back situation.
I think the best thing they did was bring in an offensive guy as opposed to getting rid of the defensive guy. All of that is good, but Kevin O'Connell didn't even call the plays for the Rams. Right. So who the hell is Kevin O'Connell?
I'll tell you one thing that grinds my gears is all these complaints about the quarterback, Cousins. What's wrong with this guy? There's 10 to 15 teams in this league that would beg to have him. So I think he gets too much crap.
I agree.
They've got they have a lot to work with there, and if Rodgers leaves, they've got quite the chance to take over the division lead there. New Orleans, guys, is there any hope in New Orleans without Peyton? Kamara getting arrested at the Pro Bowl, another bad sign.
Absolutely. Look, this thing, they are starting from way down below where they've always been in the last 2 decades. And obviously, it's going to be a downgrade whoever takes over for Sean Payton. But they bring in a defensive guy. Why did they do that? I have no idea. I don't know where it makes sense. But Dennis Allen his record is 8-28 as the head coach in the big leagues.
It's that good?
Yeah, I didn't think he had 8 either.
By the way, Jackson
hired up for an 0-4 start in his 3rd year. So. What I mean, Dennis Allen, is that the best you could do? I know it's a promotion, and it makes their life easier because they know him. That's all.
Well, we know what killed Denver last year, and it was the quarterback. Ron, if they get a quarterback, how far can they go? Are they that close?
Can go a long way.
A quarterback?
A lot of us that do the draft evaluations, and I'm included, we're a little bit too hard on John Elway. If you look at his last 5 drafts, they're B, B-, B+, B-, He has not turned in a bad draft at all. What he has done is hire some coaches that haven't gotten the job done with the players that they have, and they haven't figured out one position, and it just happens to be, like you said, Cris, quarterback. They have everything else in place. They have an above-average offensive line. They have above-average wide receivers. They have a tandem at running back that works. They have a quality tight end. I mean, maybe 15th or 16th best, but it's quality enough. And they've had a defense under Fangio for years. They lose Fangio's defensive acumen, but they needed to go offense. They need to get that one position right, and they need to coach a little bit better because the talent around the quarterback position has been there all the last 5 years.
And John Elway is the perfect example of you can be the greatest at your position in the history of the game. It doesn't mean you can evaluate talent at your own position. And that's been a giant disappointment. I mean, you would think of all the guys, he would have been the one to come up with somebody by now, and he's come up with zero and made some bad decisions. If that doesn't change, it won't matter. But maybe like a Jimmy G could end up there, and that would be good enough for a transitional period.
Chicago and Miami, that's an interesting grouping. I'm not optimistic at all about Miami. I think that they've got big problems, and I'm not optimistic at all about Chicago. I don't know why they hired a defensive coach. Do either of you two have any optimism for those teams?
No. To me, Miami is bad just because of the fact they got rid of the one guy in Brian Flores who got the most out of everything. He did a phenomenal job there, and then they fire him. We're going to find out more about the legal stuff soon and how much it came into play that the owners wanted him to fix games and lose just to get in a better spot. So bottom line is they went backwards. And now they're starting from, is Tua the guy? I don't think he's the guy, but is he good enough to even get them through the next few years? If he's not, and they got an unproven Mike McDaniel, what has he done? You know, he's been a Shanahan, whether it was Kyle or his dad. He's worked for the Shanahans for the last decade mostly, and he hasn't done that much. So we'll see.
Yeah. I like the promise of McDaniel, but it's a one step back situation. He inherits a good roster. He inherits a pretty good draft team, but they're going to miss Flores because the sum of their defensive parts really screams 6-11, and somehow they're not. They went 9-8. So, you know, like Cris said, they got the most out of this team, and they're going to find that out most likely in 2022. But this guy has some smarts to him. There's a couple of coaches that inherit situations where it could be a one step back. You learn on the job. The placement of that first bye week in the 2022 season. Let's hope for the new coaches, especially the ones that have never coached before, that it's in weeks 4, 5, and 6, and not in weeks 9, 10, and 11 when it's too late.
And Cris, you being a lifelong Lions fan, and we'll hold our hearts for you just thinking about that. But the fact that you know the Bears very, very well in that division, they've always been a defensive team. So that's the only reason I could think of. Okay, they brought in a defensive coordinator in Matt Eberflus. Maybe he's something that can turn the D around, because they've been a disappointment after they made that giant trade with the Raiders a few years, and they've just gone down the spiral. As opposed to, they should have been great defensively.
Yeah, but they're just old. I mean,
exactly.
They're old. So they've actually got to restock the defense, and you're hiring a defensive coach to tutor a rookie quarterback, second-year quarterback.
Not good.
I just don't see it. I thought that there was different ways to go. So great first special. Where do we go from here? Why should football be interesting? Where do you go from here? Where do you focus your energy here?
Because the whole world wants to know about football every damn day. That's why. And
we
Ron,
need to fill the void.
Because we've got the next 3 weeks what's going on with the draft coming up, and then the combines and all kinds of fun stuff.
You know what I'm looking forward to is, Ron and I have been friends for well over a decade. And I know you guys have been friends for 50 years, 40 years?
Yes, since high school.
So, but Ron does an excellent job. I used to go away for the summers, and I wouldn't do any NFL. And unfortunately, with the life situations, I'll be here all summer. So what I really dreaded was coming back to read what he wrote all summer long, and to have to try to absorb it all at once. And what I'm really looking forward to, and I think it's going to be really valuable in upcoming shows, is just learning a little bit at a time. And if you come into next season fluent, it just makes life so much easier that you don't have to play catch up when the season starts to get rolling. Ron, what are some of the things that you prepare during the off season?
Well, this is great off season. Well, it's great and it's not so great. Normally in February, we're in some foreign country. The Super Bowl is over and we've got 4 weeks to go. But now the Super Bowl is 2 weeks later than it ever was. The combine is coming up, and we're not going anywhere still with the traveling and other matters. So basically, this is the deepest draft that we're ever going to see, in my opinion, a lot due to COVID, the super seniors, the people who stayed in school to hone their skills and so on. It's not the deepest draft in the first round, but teams that have draft choices in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, these are starters, maybe not in 2022. So number one, I'm preparing for a combine and for the draft. Number two, I've already completed my analysis of all 32 teams, and I'm putting it into the kind of order that I want to do. Number three, free agency starts in 2 weeks. And the first 48 hours are crazy, and they're already starting to stock their rosters. And then number four, right after the first 2 days, we know what the team needs are, and we can prepare for the draft. And then right after that, we get the season win totals. We get the divisional things that we're going to be talking about as we go division by division. And we can actually put a number on what we think the number is going to be, what we hope the number is going to be, how they've handled free agency, how they've handled the draft. And we're not even to the end of May, and we've got a snapshot of where we think this thing is going.
And I can't believe that you didn't even mention draft props coming up, where you go crazy.
I'm sorry, I didn't mention that too. I already have two.
But you know what? That's something, Chris, that we're going to get into big time that week, because there is a lot of quality props that you could take advantage of, and I think Ron's going to help us look at the values of some of these things as much as anybody could help us.
I'm looking really forward to that, and I've learned a lot over the last year on this, and that is whatever you hear, don't believe it. So Ron, you tweeted that out today. Is that there's a lot of false information, and hopefully we can, help sift through the nonsense a little bit in future shows.
Absolutely.
Just today, I was reading, and it just dawned on me, every article I was reading was nonsense. With stuff that, boy, if you put this into your brain, it's going to set you back. Stop doing that. Just get factual stuff and go to some sources that are more trustworthy. So
remember, they're all looking for filler now. This is filler material. We're not going to do filler. We're doing facts. And then obviously analysis as well. Not just, maybe this will happen, maybe that'll happen, or this rumor. We're not breaking stories on fake rumors. We're going to give facts and try to analyze what the hell they all mean.
Yeah, and Ron, make sure that you're pulling this stuff aside, because we need as many visual aids as possible, because nobody wants to be staring at us for 45 minutes.
I certainly don't.
So that should pretty much wrap up the first show, shouldn't it, guys? Anything else to add?
Yeah, I think we covered the transition from last season to this season, and now the combine's coming up next. I'm not a big combine guy because I think a lot of the numbers are overrated. But we should go over some things where guys stand out, or maybe their disappointments as well, and how you think that they're going to do it. It's going to affect where they get drafted, right, Ron?
Well, it's going to affect how GMs put different spins on different numbers and different positions and stuff like that. We're going to get an idea on how these GMs use the combine information, what players are workout warriors, they get to the top, and if the teams, and we're not going to know until late April when they draft whether or not we trust the GMs or not trust the GMs, but we're going to get a lot of information before then. We're going to be able to decide where the roster is. In 2.5 weeks, we could already be talking about roster improvements or rosters that have been gutted by free agency. Then in the draft, we're going to be able to talk about, did they fill their needs, what's going on next, and so on. Then when the season win totals, we've got something coming up. When the schedule comes up, we're going to be talking about factual stuff about peaks and valleys for each team. The trap plays, the fourth place schedules. We're going to talk, and we're going to do factual stuff. We already know the information last year. Which teams, like Cleveland in the past year, what was Cleveland's record last year? 11-5 or whatever it was in the 16-game schedule, and they had a negative point ratio. They had a negative point ratio last year. Yep. So they didn't, by Pythagorean theorem methodology, which is one of the things that I take into account, they weren't a 12-4, 11-5 team from last year. And if other people did not downgrade them, we certainly did.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I'm looking forward to the next few weeks because it's going to set up the new season. And, those schedules, when they come out, that changes everything because now we have something to really focus on.
Absolutely. And then also in future shows, I think we're going to have a lot more give and take and conversation. I know I don't have any time to waste. I'm not looking to have shows that are time filler. Looking to share information that's actionable, either filing away in your brain or something that you can do on the spot. Learn a little bit as you go along and be ready to go when the next season starts instead of trying to absorb it all at once.
Meat and potatoes for the next one, whichever division we decide to start off first. I think we're going to provide meat and potatoes for each of the teams, and we're already going to be forming some. They're not set in stone. As Cris says on many a show, you have to be willing to pivot depending on what happens in free agency, the draft, the schedule, and so on. But we're going to start with some opinions that I've already formed on the teams that we go division by division. I don't know what division we're starting with, but I'm getting excited.
Yeah. By the way, for everybody listening, if you're a vegan, meat and potatoes means facts. Okay, so that's a good.
Don't forget to
Hey,
buy his book.
I love that touchy greatness. I appreciate it, guys. Looking forward
Some
to the
good.
next show.
All right, for Ron and Ted and me, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back soon.
You got it, guys.